Hello, everyone. I am Penny from Living Proof, and I'm here today with Chris Sykes-Popham, who recovered from ME/CFS and who is here today to share his recovery story and to tell us about the app that he has since developed specifically for people with ME/CFS. So, Chris, tell us a little bit about, first of all, about what your life was like before you became ill, if you would.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, thank you, Penny. It's it's genuinely an honor to get to do these kind of things, and yeah, I appreciate it. But in answer to your question, life before was busy. It was active, and life before was great. I come from a military background. I was a Royal Marines commando, and that meant I had to stay fit. I guess it was part of the job, but I loved that part. So yeah, life before was very active. I'd train 6, 7, 8, sometimes more times a week, and absolutely loved it. And military life was understandably very busy. And when I wasn't doing military things, I was doing the same things in my own time anyway. I was skiing, I was skydiving, paragliding, free diving. I got my private pilot license because I wanted to fly small planes. Anything adventurous, I just loved. And so life back then was very full on. And at some point, I started to notice light symptoms, very manageable. But if I trained, I would then pay a price for it over the next few days. Sometimes I couldn't quite think my way through things like normal. I would not be able to get stuff done, wouldn't have the energy and drive, and I would sleep poorly. And I think that was the very first time I noticed something, but I was still functioning fine, and I ended my military career on a big high. Really, I did 3 back-to-back operational tours at the end of my 10 years of service, and they were, I was working in high tempo in environments, 16, 20 hours a day, and doing that for weeks, sometimes months on end. And so I was still absolutely performing. I had experienced light symptoms, but I certainly didn't think I had ME/CFS.
So tell us more about that. So you had already taken the decision to leave the military, and you left, and then you started to feel worse.
And when I left and things started getting worse, I could just do less and less and less, and I still didn't have a clue what was going on. I think really the thing I'd noticed is I couldn't train like I could before, and I used to love staying fit. And now I would go to the gym, go to the changing room, and just sleep and just lock myself in the changing room and nap, and then go and try and do a workout, but not be able to barely do anything. Then I'd go to work and lock myself in the toilet and fall asleep in the toilet. Obviously, very, very soon I had to give up training, and I think maybe that gave me some relief for a couple of weeks, but didn't really do anything. And then I had to give up work entirely. And I think that's hard. Royal Marines training is renowned for being one of the most miserable, horrible experiences on the planet. And I would rather go through it, I think, several times with my hands tied behind my back than go through the depths of ME/CFS again. But my mood was just constantly up and down, and it felt like it was happening to me. It felt like I had no control over it. I had a constant low-level cold. My hands and feet were freezing. I had infection. My ears were infected. My toenails were infected. I had headaches constantly, and my sleep was always awful. And I was still getting worse at this point. So I would still be like, how long am I going to be out for this time? And how bad is it? Because the last one was horrendous. How bad is this one going to be? And I look back and it's the definition of catastrophizing, but it was incredibly understandable to give myself some credit, because it was awful and it was terrible and it was the worst thing I'd experienced in my life so far. So it was understandable to react in that way.
Yeah. And
I was going to the doctor, and I was going through all the tests you normally do. And so I had normal blood tests, and the occasional value was a little bit out. So I'd then get sent for loads of extra tests and extra panels, and had my liver checked, thyroid, cortisol levels, and various cortisol tests. And eventually, after, probably to the point of like, okay, you again kind of thing, he was just like, all we can do here is transfer you to a fatigue clinic. And it was a clinic for people with ME/CFS and long COVID. And I remember then I was like, okay, well, what does this mean? My my goals, my ambitions, my life, all the things I want to do. I don't think I can do any of them anymore.
Yeah.
And that's the particularly savage part of the process. And I was still worsening. At this point, I could barely leave the house. Some days I could, some days I couldn't.
Yeah.
And just searching for answers. Everyone goes through the same phase, don't they, where you're searching for answers, trying things endlessly. Diets, like trying anti-inflammatory diets, cutting out dairy, cutting out everything you think might be a trigger.
Yeah.
I'd already taken supplements, but now my supplement levels were crazy.
Yeah.
Because there's no shortage of recommendations for supplements. And I tried some weird stuff. I remember everyone has something. I remember trying at one point liters and liters of salted water a day and loads of Nurofen because somebody online had said it would work. And funny enough, it didn't.
Yeah.
Eventually, I came to the conclusion or realized that nothing I was doing was ever going to add up to a recovery. And I think that was my lowest step. That was the point where I was like, nothing I'm doing is actually really doing anything.
Yeah. Okay, so you hit a kind of low point. And then clearly at some point something changed because you're sitting in front of us and you're 100% well again. So what changed? What did you discover?
What changed is a friend of mine recommended an app to me, and it was an app called Curable, and it's actually designed for chronic pain. And to give myself some credit, early on, I'd always had the attitude and just be like, I don't care what the cure is. I don't care what helps. If it's standing on one hand waiting for Venus to be aligned with Mars, I'll do it. But I definitely started it from a place of skepticism, and I remember Googling everything. Because the first thing, all these things, they're all telling us that our brain can affect your body, right? That's the fundamental premise. And so I remember literally starting with that. I was like, can the brain affect the body? And then you Google it, and then you're like, yeah, okay, the brain can obviously affect the body. I know I salivate before I start even eating a burger. Just seeing it will make me salivate. I know watching a film can give me goosebumps. But then I was like, there's a big leap from goosebumps to what I'm experiencing. And then I learned about the nervous system and how it can control our body and how it's meant to be stuck in fight or flight mode in people with ME/CFS and long COVID. And I was like, okay, fine, I can sort of buy that, and I'd heard it before. But again, it was kind of a big leap, and I was like, can it really produce these symptoms? And I went symptom by symptom and checked it out, and it is is indicative of the place I was in. But I was like, okay, can it control my energy levels? Can it actually control my energy? And then you're like, yeah, like that's its job. And then I thought, well, yeah, but what about some of the weird things? Like, why have I got cold hands and feet? And you're like, okay, that's his job to control circulation. And I went like symptom by symptom, and I was like, okay, maybe I'm onto something. And then I was like, well, what controls the nervous system? Like, what do we do about it? And then it was like the brain. I also remember early on, I heard this story. It was this story of two brothers. And two brothers are walking down the road, and they go around the corner, they turn around the corner, and they see a massive dog. And the first brother was bitten as a kid by a dog. And he walks around the corner, and he goes straight into fight or flight mode. And his nervous system ramps up to deal with the threat. Adrenaline surges through his body. His heart rate goes wild, and he's working out whether he's going to fight this thing or just run away. Massive physiological response. And the other brother walks around the corner, and he's just like, and he loves dogs. And his best friend as a kid had a really nice fluffy dog. His Instagram feed, if you looked at it, would be nothing but cute puppies. And his response in his body is calm. He's experiencing joy, and his body has stayed in rest and digest mode. And I found that really useful because I was like, okay, the same genetics, they're responding to exactly the same situation, but an entirely different response. And the response they're experiencing is physical. There are physiological changes happening in the body. And all of that explanation, the initial explanation and that story was enough to really get me to commit. Within 3 weeks, I was at 80, 90% of my capacity, and I was able to go out running again. And that was an incredibly profound experience. And so I knew I was onto something. And that obviously was the tons of evidence I need. But then, yes, I got to 80-90% really quickly. And I know a little bit about your story. I remember you saying, I think it was, you told me that when you have a recovery like that, sometimes people's reaction is, in this field, they're like, oh, that's bad. And you're like, what do you mean? I'm at 90%. And it's only bad because it then means you've got to then go away and do the hard work behind recovery. Yeah. So I then dived in, read loads of books.
So now you are fully well. What would you say that you have kind of learned about yourself and about how to maintain health and wellness and how you live now? Maybe you could tell us something about that.
We're all trying to learn about our stress systems and trying to regulate them, because that's what's going on here. And early on, I had actually already heard about, I think it's broadly accepted that people with ME/CFS and long COVID are stuck in fight or flight mode. And so I'd heard this early on, and then I had just jumped to all the wrong conclusions. And looking back, it's understandable. But before, I was like, okay, so if the problem is I'm stuck in fight or flight mode, that's fine. I'll just avoid fight or flight mode. And now, obviously, I have learned that that's deeply unhelpful. It's trying to avoid fight or flight mode is a guaranteed way of keeping you in fight or flight mode. And it's also impossible. If you want to live a life, then it's impossible. So we're not trying to avoid stress. We're not trying to avoid fight or flight mode. We're trying to have our brains process the world around us in a way that's helpful, so that we go into fight or flight mode when we need, and then return to a normal state of homeostasis the rest of the time. But for me, here's the ones that really affected me. The first was how I responded to symptoms. This was huge for me. Before, when symptoms came on, I would catastrophize. I would worry about it. I'd be like, oh God, what does this mean for me? I'm going to be out for days. I would be almost panicking. And it didn't feel like that. And when I first heard this explanation, I was like, no, that's not me. I would honestly be like, no, well, that doesn't apply to me. I'm not scared of them. I'm a Royal Marines commander. I'm not scared of symptoms. And then over the next day or two, I was like, this is me. And it becomes subconscious. It becomes so normalized. So instead of responding with worry and fear and everything else, I learned to sit with my symptoms more peacefully. I learned that they're uncomfortable. They're not pleasant experiences, but they're safe. And sitting with them and accepting them is a lot better. I also had to confront my personality a little bit. And again, we have lots of science and lots of studies that show us that there are unhelpful personality traits that keep us in that heightened state of alert. And again, I completely dismissed it. And then I looked back and I was like, hang on, I was a type of person that went against thousands of people to join the Royal Marines as an officer. And then when I did that, that wasn't enough for me. I had this constant need and pressure to achieve things. And that was not always coming from a healthy place. And it's not that goals, ambitions, or trying to achieve things is bad. It's not that getting to these places is bad. It's the place it was coming from. And so I became curious about that and why I had that constant need to achieve. And that was, again, a game changer. And the final one I will talk about, because I think it's important. It's, again, one of the most scientifically proven ones we have, that we know it causes us to stay in this state, which is emotional suppression. And when I first heard that, I was like, that's a bit woo-woo. Like, how does that do it? But you then learn, and it then suddenly makes sense. You're like, okay, if I ignore my emotions are all just telling me to do things. If I'm angry, it's telling myself to stick up for myself. And if I'm not doing those things, if I'm ignoring my emotions, they just ramp up until you do actually take action. Age 35, I had to learn how to feel my emotions. I didn't think I had emotions. I had to learn to feel them, to express them, and to take action on them. Recovery is an incredibly profound and powerful thing to go through.
Since you've got well, you have gone on to develop an app specifically for people with ME/CFS. Would you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, when I got better, I knew very, very quickly that I wanted to work in this field because it's so powerful. That moment will stay with you for the rest of your life, and you are a person who has realized you have got their life back. And I couldn't believe how few people hear about these tools. And that's how FreeMe started. So I was like, okay, I want to gather, the most effective, accepted, commonly used techniques and make them hyper accessible. Just put them in one app, because that's what had been useful to me. And I found the app so helpful. And I knew that that's all I could really do when I was bad. I would drag myself from my bed to my sofa and I'd sit there for 5 hours on my phone. And I was like, okay, like it needs to be hyper accessible. And that's what FreeMe is trying to do. It's trying to take all of these approaches and make it super easy and super simple. And I mentioned Curable. Curable is the app that helped me, and Curable is designed for chronic pain, and it is brilliant. If you have chronic pain, I always say this, if you have chronic pain, and that's your primary condition, go use Curable, because it is amazing. But it was a little bit harder trying to convert everything to fatigue. And I think you need something specifically for fatigue, for PEM, and all the other things that come with it. And that is what FreeMe is for. FreeMe is designed specifically for ME, CFS, and long COVID, and closely related fatigue-related conditions. PEM is post-exertional malaise and crashes. That's what everyone, I guess, knows it as. So crashes, that deals with that. That deals with the cycle you go into that I talked about earlier, and a better way of dealing with things that can actually change your experience and change and reduce your symptoms and stop you crashing.
So the app is now available, and we will put a link to it at the bottom of this interview as well when we post it.
So we have built the world's first AI chatbot that exists and is trained on the mind-body approach and neuroscience-based approaches, so you can get support, advice, ask any question, you can learn something, and then be like, okay, well, how do I actually apply that to me? So FreeMe is evolving and changing quickly and fastly. It's already, I think, an incredibly powerful tool. I'm biased, but incredibly powerful, and it's going to carry on getting better.
Well done on being the person that has come forward with this app that we so badly needed, and we're going to really look forward to seeing it and how much it helps people. Amazing.
Yeah, thank you, Penny. Yeah, thank you. And yeah, it's as I said, it's an honor to be doing this with Living Proof, because that is, as I said, one of the most important parts of the journey is seeing recovered people, noticing the trends. So yeah, thank you for everything you're doing. It's genuinely incredible.
Thank you very much indeed for those kind words.